to V Knowledge on Cinema. I'm Victor Omoayo, and today's film is The Night of the Hunter, starring Robert Mitchum, Shelley Winters, Lillian Gish, Billy Chapin, Sally Jane Bruce, Peter Graves, and James Gleason. Directed by Charles Lawton, written by James Agee, and released in 1955. At its core, The Night of the Hunter is a simple story of good versus evil. However, the film plays out as an expressionistic Southern Gothic tale that is filled to the brim with indelible imagery, macabre melodrama, and equal doses of horror and humor. Robert Mitchum plays what is perhaps his most memorable role as the devious Reverend Henry Powell, a false prophet and serial killer who attempts to hunt down two young children in pursuit of some stolen cash left by their deceased father. This one-of-a-kind motion picture was the first, and sadly the only film, directed by the venerated actor Charles Lawton, best known for his performances in films such as Witness for the Prosecution, The Hunchback of Notre Dame, and the 1935 Best Picture Oscar winner, Mutiny on the Bounty. When The Night of the Hunter was released, audiences didn't know what to make of such a weird and unique film, and the movie bombed critically and commercially. Lawton was so discouraged by the film's reception that he never directed another film again, which is a total shame because what we have here is a masterfully realized tale of innocence versus corruption, and love versus hate. The movie opens with a chorus of children singing "Dream Little One, Dream," after which an old woman appears over a black, starry background. We later learn that she is one Rachel Cooper, played by screen legend Lillian Gish, and she is telling a biblical story to a group of little children about the dangers of false prophets. This strange and brief scene establishes the film's dreamlike tone, which immediately plunges into nightmarish depths in the next scene, where a gang of young boys come across the dead body of an unknown woman underneath the cellar door. The segment after this introduces us to the perpetrator, the ravenous killer Harry Powell, who is driving down a dirt road while having a conversation with himself, or with God as he'd put it. Powell offers a glimpse into his blatant hypocrisy, justifying his crimes by saying that the Lord doesn't mind the killings since his book is full of them, and that there are things he hates, like perfume-smelling things, lacy things, things with curly hair. Cut to a scene at a burlesque house where Powell resentfully stares at one of those perfumed, lacy, curly things strutting her stuff on stage. The spotlight around the dancer is sort of shaped like a keyhole, representing the voyeuristic gaze of the crooked preacher and the rest of the patrons. Seething with pent-up frustration in his seat, Powell reaches into his coat pocket and his switchblade knife juts out of the fabric. This disturbing reaction of his is one example of Powell's internal war within himself. For Powell, sex is a vile and reprehensible act which must always be met with violence. His being inside the burlesque house isn't so much a reflection of his suppressing his urges, as it is his desire for giving his crimes a sense of purpose. It's like his twisted spin on Christ being in the midst of the so-called evils of the world. Powell is soon arrested and thrown in jail, where he shares a cell with another man, Ben Harper, who killed two people and stole $10,000. The preacher fails to persuade Harper to spill the beans on where he stashed the money, and after the man is executed, Powell is released and eventually makes his way to a small West Virginia town, where he meets the newly widowed Willa Harper and her two children, John and Pearl. Before their father was arrested, Ben told his two kids to hide the loot and not tell anyone, not even their own mother, about it. But with the bloodthirsty and money-hungry preacher man lurking about, that secret becomes an impossible burden to conceal. One thing that adds to the tension of the film is the fact that all of the adults in the film, except for Rachel Cooper, are alarmingly unreliable and/or gullible. For instance, Willa is quickly taken into the fake preacher's charms as she is browbeaten into marrying him by the obnoxiously nosy and irritating ice cream shop owner, Mrs. Icy Spoon. Willa also refuses to believe John when he tries vainly to warn her about Powell's search for the money. There's also another moment when Powell captivates the attention of Icy and Willa with a story about his notable tattoos. In capital letters, the word love is written on his right hand, and the word hate is scrawled on his left. This was famously referenced by the character of Radio Raheem in 1989's Do the Right Thing. Powell's fire and brimstone delivery of his story plays effectively on the religious sensibilities of the two women, and Little Pearl is rapt with amazement, but only John sees a bull selling nothing but BS. Later on, when John and Pearl are trying to escape from Powell's clutches, they realize that they have to fend for themselves when their elderly friend, Uncle Bertie, is passed out in a drunken stupor, too distraught to protect the kids after seeing Powell's handiwork at the bottom of the river. Regarding the character of Willa, played by Shelley Winters, I found it disquieting how she was so quick to trust Powell. Even when she initially declares that she doesn't need a husband, and was rightfully skeptical about the preacher's true intentions, she's pressured into submission by both the man and the patriarchal notion that raising kids alone isn't what a decent woman does. Willa is shamed even further in a cringeworthy scene when Powell scolds her for wanting to consummate their new marriage on their wedding night. Instead of standing up for herself, Willa prays to get herself clean in the way Harry wants her to be, and she immediately embraces his warped philosophy, publicly condemning and blaming herself for driving her late husband to a life of crime. For someone with her name, Willa shows an appalling lack of self-will and confidence, which makes her easy prey for the false prophet. The Night of the Hunter is full of arresting, shadowy visuals, brilliantly lensed by the cinematographer Stanley Cortez, who is known for his work in Orson Welles' The Magnificent Ambersons. There are a couple of wide shots where you see the entire set with the left and right sides of the frame dipped in black, as if the settings are boxed in, further enhancing the film's sense of claustrophobic fear. One of these shots sees Willa and Powell in their bedroom, which is oddly shaped like a chapel. Powell stands in the moonlight beaming through the rooftop window, looking as if he's ritualistically preparing to murder his new bride, or in his mind, send his latest offering to the Lord. Willa lies on the bed with her arms folded, as if she already knows what is going to happen, but she accepts her fate. It's as if she believes that in order for her to really become pure and atone for her own transgressions, she must offer her own life. Willa realizes that she has failed her duty as a mother to protect her kids from the big evil living in her home, and once again contrary to her name, loses her will to live. Powell murders her, and we see the results in a haunting yet hypnotizing image of her body tied to the car Powell drove in the beginning of the film underwater. Clothed in a white robe, Willa becomes Powell's latest baptism. Shortly afterwards, the film brings us to a mesmerizing 10-minute sequence where John and Pearl are riding away down the Ohio River, having escaped from Powell. At one point in the film, Rachel laments that it's a hard world for small things. As they make their way down the river, we see images in the foreground of a spider's web, a bullfrog, and a couple of rabbits. Also, when they arrive at a barn to rest, the cows in the foreground appear to be massive. All of these foreground subjects appear to be gigantic, while John and Pearl seem smaller in the background, as if to illustrate the overwhelming scale and force of nature, or the real world that threatens the innocence of the two kids. At the barn, we also see a common horror movie element with the monstrous Powell tirelessly following the two kids at a distance, his body silhouetted as he rides on horseback, singing "Leaning on the Everlasting Arms," a hymn that, coming from Powell, sounds just as unsettling as the Freddy Krueger song. John and Pearl eventually find safety under the care of Rachel, a warm yet assertive old woman who is the film's right hand of love that must become a fist against Powell's left hand of hate. Rachel and the fake preacher have an eerie standoff where they sing "Leaning on the Everlasting Arms," with Rachel sitting in her chair armed with her shotgun, while Powell sits on a tree stump outside, ready to slither in her home when she least expects it. Now, as creepy as the film is, the film doesn't take itself too seriously. The Night of the Hunter is just as funny as it is fearful, and Robert Mitchum incorporates an equal amount of ridiculousness into his role as he does menace. He falls flat on his face when he tries to capture John and Pearl in their basement, and when he fails to catch their boat, he lets out a guttural scream like a wounded beast. Most people wondered if the movie was supposed to be a horror film or just a comedy. There really wasn't any other film like it prior to its release, and for decades The Night of the Hunter was largely overlooked. Over the years, the film gradually earned the praise it deserved, and today the film is rightly viewed as an American classic. In 1992, it was added to the National Film Registry by the US Library of Congress. The Night of the Hunter is a genuine masterpiece, and for a film that was made almost 60 years ago, it still feels fresh and different. Check this out if you're looking for something that strays from the norm. I'm Victor Omoayo, and I'll see you at the movies.